thought it was really important to do a deeper dive here of BEMA Intel. It's a really amazing tool that we have developed, and these folks over here are a big part of that. So please come on up, Marjorie Hellmer, Tim Cook, Jason Ward, and Josh Sosland.
Good morning, everyone. Please, gentlemen. I'm going up on the stage and coming down from the stage. Good morning. I just can't tell you how very nice it is to be with everyone in person. No masks. Wow, it's special. And so, early-ish on a Friday morning, with coffee in hand and business on our minds, let's talk one of my favorite topics. Let's talk data. So everyone in this room knows that baking and equipment industry professionals at every level of an organization need access to quality market intelligence. Whether you are establishing the strategies at the highest level of your organization, or you are executing on those strategies by selling to customers, or keeping an eye on your own supply chain issues within your company. But how are you getting a hold of industry intel? Are you reaching out to your customers and asking them for what they see as the market drivers? Are you leaning back on your industry colleagues and asking them what they see around the corner? Maybe sometimes it almost feels like you're relying on smoke signals when you're trying to anticipate the next big shift in the marketplace. Now, there are really good quality market information sources that are specific to the baking and equipment manufacturing industries. And even though we don't have as many market information sources within manufacturing as businesses have that kind of support on the consumer side, in this age of technology, we really do have almost constant access to data, an ocean of data. But with that can come confusion when you're trying to parse out, digest, and react to the available data. And along with this ocean of data comes a real struggle for industry professionals to discern the value of the information that you're viewing. And you also can sometimes need help answering the question, okay, what does all of this mean? BEMA Intel is the solution to being overwhelmed by an ocean of data. It is your platform for data graphics and data trends in the baking and equipment manufacturing industries. It was designed by industry experts for industry leaders. And if you aren't very familiar with Intel yet, it is a data graphics platform that is delivered onto the BEMA website every quarter. And it's comprised of easy-to-read visuals and data graphics to help you quickly tell what's happening in the changing business climate within the baking and equipment industries. And as of the end of the first quarter of this year, you now have access to a full 12 months worth of industry intel trends. Because ironically, we kicked off this initiative back toward the beginning of the pandemic last year and released our first quarter's worth of data in Q2 of 2020. And so what that represented pretty early on, April, May, June. And so having this at your fingertips puts into context what is happening. And Cypress Research is very excited to be part of the Intel team. Our firm is responsible for compiling and conducting all the research around Intel. We also designed and we maintain the online data dashboard. And with me this morning are BEMA members and some of the key experts that are responsible for the development of Intel. We have Jason Ward with AMF Bakery Systems, President. We have Tim Cook with us, the CEO of Shick, Esteve, and Vice President of the Linxis Group. And we have with us Josh Sosland, the President of Sosland Publishing and editor of Milling and Baking News and Food Business News. So these guys have stayed intimately involved as Intel has developed over time. And together, what we would like to do is hold a discussion about just the basics of Intel. We're going to show you what it is. We're going to talk about why it was developed and give you some of those practical applications that you can use for your business and in your role as industry professionals at every level of the organization that you work for. And so here, displayed on the screen, are the three components, the main components of the Intel platform. So by going onto the BEMA website and clicking on the Programs tab and selecting the Intel page, every quarter a fresh new set of summary trends is posted to that landing page. And it's there for your use until the next quarter becomes available. So you can reference that anytime. And by scrolling down to the bottom of the page and logging on to the member suite, you as a BEMA member have exclusive access to the other two components. We have the BEMA Equipment Manufacturer Member Pulse Survey that goes out quarterly and asks equipment manufacturers for the outlook for the industry and the current state and the health of their businesses. So that full set of findings is exclusively accessible to you all. The third piece is the industry indicators section. Now that is your deep dive into all of the non-BEMA member pulse indicator data. So the breadth of what is offered is still very tightly selected. On the summary, you are going to see kind of that overview, that quarterly overview of the 10 plus indicators that have been selected to best represent the industry health for baking and equipment. And those include some general indicators that we go out and grab and put onto the Intel platform. US economic data, general business indicators, published industry-specific indicators, and then the unique data created specifically for Intel, which is that BEMA member pulse survey data that comes out every quarter. So we would like to start our discussion with a conversation about elements of the quarterly summary. And I think we could start with Tim and Jason. If you guys could talk to the room about kind of the importance of developing the Intel platform and the need that it fills in the industry.
Sure. You want me to start, Jason? So first of all, good morning, BEMA. Great to see everybody here in person. To answer your question, I think I would make 2 points. First of all, very simply, this BEMA Intel report represents what I would like to be able to share with my stakeholders when I'm trying to explain to them what's going on in our industry. And I would say for years that's been a challenge because there are two things that we all have in common in this industry. Number one, our order intake is extremely lumpy. And so we may be on a high one quarter and on a low the next quarter. And so just managing that and understanding where we are in the industry cycle is sometimes a challenge. But the other thing is that the industry is very niche. It's very, very specific. And so I might be able to call Jason and say, Jason, what's going on with your business? How's your backlog? What are you seeing in bookings? And his oven business may be great, but you know what? I don't make oven. And so that's one data point. And then I could call Josh and I could say, Josh, economically, what do you see happening? You know, what's the price of flour doing? And I can spend time trying to collect dozens of data points when I'm trying to explain to my stakeholders what's happening in the industry at large, and that takes a lot of time and effort and is still sketchy at best. BEMA Intel gives us that information that I've been trying to collect for years all in one place. And so I think it fills that need of being able to understand, have a broader view of what's happening in our industry.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think in addition to what's happening in the industry now, it really is about what's going to happen in the future, and that's really the hardest part is, you know, a lot of this information is obviously available, but being able to aggregate, you know, the publicly available economic data, the industry-specific indicators, and then add in this feedback from the industry of what they are seeing today and what we think is going to happen in the future. That's the difference maker for BEMA Intel. We are all, as leaders, quite effective in looking at what has happened in the past and explaining why we have the results we have, but being able to have a point of view driven by data and corroborated with the industry for the future is really, really powerful.
True, true. Well, why don't we give them a feel for, if, in case you aren't very familiar with Intel, we're going to share with you some elements of the summary. And this is going to represent the end of the first quarter of this year. So this is the most recent summary data available. And what you're going to notice about the Intel platform is that it's color-coded. So you can very quickly get a sense of what's happening in the market. So it's color-coded in the way that these bracelets for the convention are color-coded. Green, yellow, red, easy, right? Green stands for a positive industry impact. Yellow is neutral and red is negative. And so that makes it easy for you to get a quick sense. Now, the summary that's posted to the BEMA website always opens with the same two metrics. And those are taken from the BEMA Member Pulse survey. And so what you're looking at here is equipment industry outlook and equipment bookings as of the end of the first quarter of 2021. And so in green at the top, you can see we have equipment manufacturers, we have 95% reporting a positive industry outlook. And this is up from our baseline in Q2 of 2020. So remember, near the beginning of the pandemic, we had a 76% positive outlook. So we're up from that point near the beginning of the pandemic. When equipment manufacturers were asked if their bookings were up, steady, or down by the end of the first quarter, you can see here in green, 44% reported that their bookings are up and 7% down. Now, to put that in a little bit of context, that vertical bar chart takes us from left to right, from the beginning, nearly the beginning of the pandemic, until quarter by quarter, all the way to the right is the end of the first quarter of this year. So what you can do is follow that color coding and see that early on in the pandemic, that high of 45 or so percent reporting that their bookings were down at that point, all the way down to 7%. So a little bit of the power of Intel. So Tim, I would like to return to you. You know, the summary, the quarterly summary is posted 2 weeks into every new quarter because we know that you all need these data as soon as possible. What do you see as sort of the relevance of having both a quarterly snapshot and then having that historical arc of, you know, going from pandemic to recovery?
Sure. Yeah, so it really gives us great confirmation in terms of what's happening in the cycle. And so I can tell you as business leaders, every one of us looks at the quarterly data shown here, and we can remember what we were feeling emotionally, right? In Q2 of last year, it was a really scary time. And there was a lot of negativity in terms of perception of what was happening in the market, all due to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then you could start to see, and we could feel it in our own business, that in Q3 we started to pull out of that. Things started to get more positive. People started ordering again. And so you see the trend follow, and we finished Q1 of this year with everybody feeling extremely strong in terms of what was happening industry-wide. And again, it just gives us the broader perspective, because I may have a certain segment of my business that's performing very well, and so I may feel like my specific business is doing well, but it doesn't necessarily speak to the industry as a whole. And so just following this trend, it was really confirmation, I think, that we had come out of the worst and that things were continually getting better. And you'll remember along the way, we had fears of going back into a lockdown many times along the way.
Right.
This data shows that it was a continually strengthening graphic.
Right. Intel also tracks the grain-based food share index. And as of the end of the first quarter of this year, you can see in green that it sits at a plus 25.5%. So this is a good indicator of baking industry health. And this particular data point is provided to the Intel platform by Milling and Baking News. And below the green dot, you can see the actual data visualization that's behind the summary figure. And that is actually located within the industry indicators section of the Intel platform. And so here, Josh, what we're looking at on that graph of the GBFSI is the index plotted in gold, and then the S&P 500 at your suggestion alongside that, just as a general reference point. So can you talk to us about the relevance of including this on the Intel platform? It provides one of those look forwards with our indicator set, right?
Right, and I think that's the key. As Marjorie said, there's really an ocean of data for that we could choose from, and we publish a lot in Milling and Baking News. There's a lot of USDA data. There are many other sources of data, and one of the real challenges of this process was figuring out, okay, exactly what are we going to include? And at some level, I think the stock market seems like a pretty pedestrian choice because, first of all, it's out there. But as you were saying, the real advantage for this versus a lot of the other data, including maybe sales data or employment data, is that it is forward-looking. And it's forward-looking in a sort of objective sense. This is not what we as the baking industry think, but this is what the investment community thinks about the future of the baking industry, the food industry in general. And so to see in the past year the stock market for staples basically keeping up with the S&P 500, in this sort of a recovery, I think is a really powerful affirmation of what the Pulse survey showed, which is, yeah, there is good reason to be optimistic.
True. Every quarter, Intel also publishes the unit and dollar sales figures from IRI for packaged and fresh bakery segments. And this is compared to activity a year ago. And so it really helps us see those wild swings that happened as a result of the pandemic. And so, Jason, I'm wondering if you can talk to us about the importance of including this quarterly data and kind of the story that we're seeing as an industry.
Well, it's just, excuse me, it's just another piece of this puzzle that we're trying to put together to give a view of the current and future health of the industry. Obviously, the extent to which the commercial or in-store bakery segments are growing by dollars, by volume, percentage, that's highly relevant, and so an important piece of that overall picture. But to me, this is another example of the relevance of the data to a broad section of folks within our industry. Obviously, from a leadership standpoint, Tim's already talked about how when we're trying to communicate the health of the industry and direction to our stakeholders, this is very helpful. But think about the perspective of a salesperson, a bakery equipment salesperson, ingredient sales. You're going to meet with your customer, taking a look at this data and understanding. It provides you with topics to speak to and actually to validate with them. This is what I'm seeing in terms of overall growth year over year or on a quarterly basis. Is this what you're experiencing in your business? And so to be more well-informed, to drive higher quality discussions, it's another example where it adds a lot of value, I think, for our folks.
Right, and within the industry indicators section that's exclusively accessible to BEMA members, there's also a breakout by some of the key bakery product categories that the public doesn't get access to. So we really do kind of keep track of how some of these key products are trending, both in packaged and in fresh. So another thing we wanted to highlight that you'll see in the summary is we provide graphics on trends within ingredient costs. And again, this is generated by Milling and Baking News and provided to the Intel platform. And this movement, you see a lot of red on this slide because as everyone knows, these rising ingredient costs are causing some real pressure on bakers right now. And so it makes us, and this is compared to activity a year ago. And so if these pressures continue, it really could push down on bakers' supply chain. So this is an important factor to consider. Josh, these ingredient costs are a little bit unique in that they're based on finished products. And so can you talk to us a little bit about why we included this and sort of the relevance of tracking it?
Well, sure. There's so many different ingredients that go into baked foods. And if you just look at them all in a line, cocoa might be going up and shortening might be through the roof and sweeteners might be going the other way. So for the last 20 years or so, we've created indices based on standard formulations of the largest industry products. So if you're a donut maker, you actually see a weighted average of the various ingredients that go into a donut. And it's very consistent with this Intel idea of just keep things as sort of simple and straightforward as possible. And if you see cake donuts are up 17.4%, what you might want to do a deeper dive and figure out whether it's the flour or the shortening or all the above. But it seems like a very good fit for this particular platform. Most of these are at multi-year highs. The truth is, for just about all these categories, if we were introducing this product in a normal year, we may have come up with numbers like these just to make up to let's do something really over dramatic that will never happen, just to show people what could. Yeah. And but that's the reality our industry is living with right now.
Yeah, it's an amazing time for us to have developed this particular initiative. Well, I think we've given you a good sense of what you will see when you spend time with the quarterly summary. We're going to move to the BEMA Member Pulse survey. You saw some of the data already that's encapsulated in the summary. And I would say before we go into this, from the very beginning, when we started collecting quarterly data all the way back in Q2 of 2020, we have had really excellent participation rates on the part of the BEMA members that are equipment manufacturers. We have sat pretty steadily around a 36% response rate. And so for anyone that's a data nerd, that's a really good participation rate. And all it means is that we can really feel safe interpreting the results of the data as representing the equipment industry. But what I would like to say is if you haven't participated yet and you're an equipment supplier, it is incredibly important that you do, because then it just strengthens these results that we're able to share back with you. So if you do participate every quarter, thank you so much. Highly valued. So what we're doing here, every quarter, Intel goes back to the voice of the equipment manufacturer. And what we're looking at here is the 6-month outlook by channel that equipment suppliers serve. So we're going all the way back to nearly the beginning of the pandemic here with these bars. And we're looking by channel, and you can follow that color coding I talked about and see that at this early point in the pandemic, the The channel that equipment suppliers were most bullish about was industrial commercial, followed by retail, and then very distantly, of course, restaurant and food service, because really, even at that early point, that channel was projected to take a real beating. So no green bars for that channel. Now, when we stack on top of that bar the rest of the quarterly data, this is where you start to put into context the differing effect of the pandemic by channels. And the story becomes one of some recovery now, right? We're even starting to see restaurant and food service experience some recovery. And Tim, maybe you could speak to what we're seeing here. You know, we have 100% of equipment manufacturers reporting at least a somewhat positive 6-month outlook in retail.
Right. And, you know, probably obvious to everybody right now why retail has been strong through the pandemic as people stayed home and prepared more meals at home and shopped more. The demand for retail products was high. What's interesting to me about this, Marjorie, is that first of all, it's forward-looking. And so that's data that allows us to plan our businesses and to have an idea of what's coming our way. And what's very interesting for me, and what I've spoken to a lot of people about here at this conference, is that we see retail continuing on a really strong trend. And that doesn't appear to be letting up. I mean, if you look at the data, at the end of Q1, you've got 100% of respondents feeling positive about the next 6 months of retail. What's most interesting to me about that is we're also seeing a resurgence now of the food service and restaurant business. And so, you know, as an equipment supplier, the first question I ask myself is, are we going to have both segments going strongly now, which would be, you know, perhaps somewhat unusual to see that kind of a strong pattern continuing across the segments, or will we see a leveling out of one as the other gets stronger? And so, you know, the question I think we're all trying to answer, and this data helps us begin to understand the picture, is do we have a new norm? You know, what has the increase in business due to the pandemic, you know, is it going to reside, now that the pandemic is over, or have we started a new trend where retail may stay strong despite the fact that food service is making a comeback? Right. And so, you know, very specifically for those of us that are operating in more than one of these channels, it just helps us understand the different dynamics from a different viewpoint.
True. And in addition to tracking the 6-month outlook by channel, we also ask equipment manufacturers to report their general equipment industry outlook. And so here for the next 6 months, we're seeing, you know, 37% of our equipment manufacturers reporting a very positive outlook for the industry for the next 6 months. And we also ask them to report both domestically and globally. And here, Jason, we have that global projection for the next 6 months. And it's somewhat tempered. I think we saw for the domestic industry, the outlook for the next 6 months was very positive by 37% of our respondents. Here, it's 26%. So it's a significant departure globally. But what are your thoughts kind of about, you know, tracking globally what's happening and the implications for the platform?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's nothing that we did on purpose, but the fact that we launched this just as, you know, pre-pandemic was just absolutely incredible. And as we were all entering uncharted territory and navigating through this, to have some kind of a tool like this to validate or raise some differences of experience that folks were having was invaluable. And then seeing through the recovery how it's all evolving has been so helpful. And so when you look at the regional look, I mean, what this reflects is what I think we've all seen, which is that the countries and the regions that are more advanced in vaccine deployment and overall recovery, you know, are reflective of a stronger outlook over the next 6 months or so. So that's China, that's North America, particularly the U.S. The question is, well, how quickly will we see the other regions recovering? And so I think we've seen, whether it's Western Europe or Latin America, those places are a few months behind.
True.
Our experience in recovery as we've opened up so much faster. But I'm going to be very interested to see those companies that have a global presence. I mean, this is very relevant to see when we start seeing that improvement in places like Europe and Greater Asia and the Middle East. And again, this is another example where if in our business we are seeing continued stagnation or lack of a pickup in orders and investment, but the survey reflects others are seeing that raises some questions for me. Are we missing something?
Right.
And to the contrary, if we have a more bullish outlook than the survey reflects, what are we as confident as we think we are in that? So whether it's the regional look or the different segments, this is all about validating or helping us better understand whether or not we're on the right track in terms of our planning and the decisions we're making in our business.
Right. And I should say that for this global outlook, only those equipment manufacturers that have business globally even answer that question. So they are qualified responses so that they're relevant. I think this is the last actual indicator that we are going to share with the group today. And again, this is BEMA Member Pulse. Each quarter, equipment manufacturers are asked for the top business challenges that they are experiencing that quarter. And here from a list of I think 11 different issues, these are the top 5 challenges. And we can see it over the course of the 12 months of Intel, with the most recent quarter sitting at the top in the gold bars for each content area. And so I think I'd like to return to you, Josh and Jason, with any of your thoughts on what we're seeing here. It looks to me like kind of the story here is, the challenges and the recovery on the part of the industry through the period of the pandemic.
Yes, and I think this, and I like this very much because when you get to the qualitative aspects of what are the challenges we're all facing, and this is very helpful, and you see what I think we'd all expect to see, which is although pandemic-related challenges are still very much present, you can see that dramatic reduction over the past few quarters. And then what are we all dealing with? And as a segue into another topic later this morning, it's supply chain disruptions and all the challenges of inflation and cost increases and transportation challenges, and just being able to get what we need to make our products in a timely and cost-effective way. What I think is particularly going to be very interesting here is that, we use that word transitory. How transitory are these challenges? I personally believe that we're going to sort through a lot of these supply chain disruptions over the next several months. I think the workforce issues are with us for a long time and are more structural.
Absolutely.
This is a great way for us to see, again, if we're feeling things not improving, but then it feels like the industry is seeing improvement in some of these challenge areas, what are we missing? Is there something we can be doing differently? So I think it's very much on point.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first BEMA meeting, but at ABA annual meetings, year after year, attracting and retaining a quality workforce is, at the top of the list of concerns in the baking industry. And if you cut through the noise, and noise probably isn't the right word, but if you in a normal year, right, COVID wouldn't be there. And you have increased material costs, sort of some extraordinary things have happened in the last few months. Normally, the quality workforce issue would actually be at the top of this list.
Yes, it would.
And it's just some really, really crazy things that are going on right now that, obviously elevate, COVID, transportation, and the material costs. But those are still really, high numbers for labor. And as Jason was saying, it really, there's no reason to think that's going away.
Well, we have taken you through some elements of the summary and the Member Pulse survey. And we won't be able to spend time sharing with you the industry indicators section, but again, that is the deep dive into the data visuals. And it is such a great, valuable resource. It's all of the non-Member Pulse indicators that are tracked that we've been talking about. And so again, you access that by logging into the member suite and just clicking directly into the industry indicators. And this is what is going to pop up for you. It is a very easy, clickable table of contents. These are all of the indicators that are part of Intel. And so it's very easy. You simply click on a heading or a subhead. It will take you directly to that section. And they're all data graphics that are now at least over a 12-month period. And so these are always updated and available to you. So I think what we would like to do is turn the conversation to you at the tables and give you a chance to talk amongst yourselves about kind of your take on Intel and maybe some of the practical applications that you see for using the platform within your businesses. And so we're going to let you do that. Then we'll come back and we'll wrap up with you. And so please feel free to start. You know, we do have table captains. We have table hosts at some of the tables to help facilitate the conversation. If you don't have a table host, someone can take that role on yourselves. So we'll give you a few minutes to chat, and then we'll be back with you. You guys can go out and be table captains if you would like, but you don't have to. And so I think we would like to come back now. Hopefully you've had enough time to talk a little bit about Intel and think about some of the practical uses of the platform. We're all so excited about it. And I wanted to ask, any final thoughts from any of the panelists?
Well, a couple of things popped to my mind, is particularly when I saw the IRI slide. As Marjorie said, we worked on this for a long time, and in a friendly way, we arm wrestled over, okay, what needs to be there, what shouldn't be there. Marjorie said, no, we can't have 1,000 different data points. It's really got to be more narrow than that. And so we wanted to make sure we had, the right data, and we wanted to make sure it was accurate. And so as we were publishing the first couple, there's a lot of crazy data during the pandemic. And one of the numbers that really jumped out at me, to the point that I said to Marjorie, we need to call IRI and make sure they have it right, is this in-store bakery data, which showed that unit sales over 52 weeks were down 27%, and which is pretty dramatic. But then dollar sales were down only 6%, and how could that possibly be? And as we talked about it, I think we came to understand, because it was double checked and it is accurate. But it really kind of shows the pivot that went on during the pandemic, as probably in-store bakeries, and maybe a lot of you are involved in this enough, you knew this was going on. We're pivoting and coming up with different package configurations when grab and go was disappearing. And it's actually a pretty amazing reflection of the resilience of in-store bakeries, that with units plunging the way they were and their business model undercut by the pandemic the way it was, that they were able to end up only down 6%. And I really think that throughout the data, there are opportunities to find really nuggets like this, where you'll look at something and it really makes you think through, how is that possible? What does that mean? Is really going on underlying the industry. So.
Absolutely.
I would just like to reinforce the plug for additional participation. I know 36% is a good number in the data world, but that means there's a lot of folks who are out there who are not participating. And I just, in addition to the time and attention that was spent to choose the right indicators, there was also a lot of time spent trying to make sure that the questions we're asking of you, provide answers that are really meaningful and valuable. Hopefully you've seen that today, if this is your first time seeing BEMA Intel. But not asking so much that you're uncomfortable or that you're sharing anything that's confidential, obviously. Sometimes that's a barrier to participation in things like this. So that was something we spent a lot of time talking about. From our perspective, are we comfortable answering? And then do we really see value in the questions that are being asked? So we spent a lot of time there. It's going to be even more valuable and more powerful for all of us if we get more participation. So just encourage that and appreciate those of you who are already doing it.
Yeah, I would just underscore what Jason said. I mean, BEMA has attempted in the past to collect relevant data to share with its members. But it's one thing to ask Jason how many mixers he sold or how many mixers he thinks he's going to sell, which might also be very interesting to his competitors. And so we didn't want information so specific that it was harmful to any individual company, but it needed to be informative enough to let us know what was happening in the industry at large. And I think we've achieved that goal. I really do. I'm very proud of what we've come up with here in the end.
Yeah, and I think just the value of this is going to build over time. We do have our first full 12 months worth of data. And when you start using the platform, or for anyone that uses it regularly, we try to provide some interpretation of what you're seeing in the numbers, just some basic interpretation. We're not trying to forecast anything for your own particular business, but we're just trying to put out there enough interpretation so you don't get lost in what we're attempting to do. So I think that's basically it for us today. I did want to preview for you, announce that. Remember at the beginning, I did say that there are now a full 12 months worth of Intel data. So now there are actually 4 components to the Intel platform. We just completed the first annual Intel culminating report. in which we really stitched together the last 12 months worth of Intel trends and put some narrative around that, put some interpretation around it, connected some of those dots, and we now have that hot off the digital press for you, and you actually get first access to it. And you don't have to go in through Member Suite. We have placed it right in the app for this session. So if you go and you just open it and you go into the description of the session, the link should be right there. Now, we loaded it right before this session. So it's not going to show up if you already had the session open earlier today. So I would just request that you close completely out of the app, go back in, look at the description, and just keep refreshing your app until it comes up. There's a link, and it'll take you directly to the culminating report. It is a really great first effort for us for that annual product that we will have for you around this time every year, actually. So do we have time for maybe one question, do you think?
Yeah.
In your table talks, did anything kind of interesting, any interesting takeaways from your discussions that you would like to share? I see it.
Well, to use Tim's example of how many mixers did you sell, we were kind of discussing the data that you get on the industry is broken down into different market segments, but the BEMA data seems to be focused on commercial or heavy industrial. It doesn't seem to be, selling one large mixer is a lot different than selling one small spiral. Selling a large tunnel oven is different than selling one rack oven. Have you considered breaking down the BEMA component for that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the data in terms of what we're asking, it's more about your bookings, your outlook, the trajectory of your business. Whether you are a large business, a small business, a highly diversified, or a narrow business, it's really do you see growth, or do you see stability, or do you see a reduction in terms of new sales or bookings? And again, part of that is trying not to get so granular that folks are unwilling to share. So that's where we started. Now this can evolve and should evolve over time, and so we're certainly open to feedback. But that's where we started, and we didn't go through everything today, but you can see a lot of that detail that is more at the macro level in terms of bookings. I don't know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at this point, even with our great participation rate, I don't think we are yet at the point of wanting to start segmenting out by size of business at this point. I think that would, it's premature at this point, but it is certainly something as the product grows over time that we can consider.
But there is a little bit in there, the distinction between retail and food service. Right. Some of that's implicit.
Right. One last comment?
Talked about more of the why and also to help plan for future. How about like percent? How are we looking with requests for quotes? How are we looking for backlog? How are we looking at orders closed? How are we looking at closing rate? That's real data that the equipment people certainly can, because a lot of this is in our rearview mirror. A lot of the data, like we saw that, we know what's happening, and we see projects 9 months to a year out. So if we're quoting like crazy and our close rates are up and our backlog's big, that kind of tells you more about the why and the direction. And why is the RFQs way up? Is it automation? Is it growth in that product segment? Is it we're trying to do more? I'm hearing every day and each day we're trying to make the same or more products with less people. So all of a sudden it wasn't viable last year or 2 years ago actually, is now super viable. Show up.
True.
So more the why is would be helpful.
Those are great suggestions. So I hope you wrote those down so you can share them with me.
Yeah, I wrote
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes and no because. I wasn't listening yesterday.
And I would just add to that, one of the challenges that we had to grapple with is keeping the surveys limited enough that people would actually respond to them. Because if we go, if it becomes a story you have to write every quarter when we ask for the data, fewer and fewer people are going to participate. And so, as Jason indicated earlier, this has got to continue to change and grow. But we thought it was smart to start in a place where we could get relevant data with as many respondents as possible. And so, rightly or wrongly, we just made some choices on what those questions should be.
I would make a small plug, though, that so Charlotte Ashley, the editor of Baking and Snack, each quarter is interviewing people in the industry once the data comes out to answer the why. Why are the numbers going the way they are? So I think BEMA and the baking industry should expect the media really. That is our job to answer the question why, and we'll do that.
Right. And I would say any notes that you took from the table talk discussion, please, I would like to get a hold of those so that we can consider some of the thoughts that you have about Intel. And with that, I think we are a wrap. Thank you all so very much.